The quantum array stretched across the lunar surface like a silver spider's web, its delicate sensors reaching into the depths of space. Dr. Sarah Chen stood at the observation window of Lunar Base Alpha, watching the massive installation shimmer under Earth's reflected light. After 15 years of scanning the cosmos, the array had detected plenty of natural phenomena, but never the one thing humanity hoped to find: evidence of intelligent life. That changed on a quiet Tuesday morning. Sarah was reviewing routine data when the alert flashed across her screen. At first, she thought it was another false positive. The array often picked up unusual patterns that turned out to be nothing more than cosmic background radiation. But this signal was different. It pulsed with a regularity that couldn't be natural, carrying complex mathematical sequences that spoke of intelligence. "Dr. Roberts," she called, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "You need to see this." The head of the Lunar Quantum Institute hurried over, his eyes widening as he studied the data. "This is structured. These aren't random pulses. They're using quantum entanglement as a carrier wave." He looked up at Sarah. "Someone out there has mastered quantum communications." Within hours, the observation room filled with scientists and military personnel. General Laura Hayes, commander of Earth's Space Defense Force, stood with her arms crossed, watching as the signal was decoded. The mathematics were universal, but the message itself was chilling. "Help us," the translation read. "They are consuming our worlds. We are the collective, and we are dying." The message continued, revealing a civilization far more advanced than humanity's. The collective spanned thousands of worlds, their technology centuries ahead of Earth's. Yet something was systematically destroying their empire, something they couldn't fight or even detect properly. "Why reach out to us?" General Hayes asked the question everyone was thinking. "We're centuries behind them technologically. What could we possibly offer?" Sarah studied the detailed technical data included with the message. "Maybe that's exactly why they contacted us. Look at their technology. It's all based on quantum mechanics and artificial gravity. They've advanced so far in one direction that they've forgotten other approaches." In Washington, the United Earth Council debated humanity's response. Representatives from every nation watched the collective's message, showing vast cities falling to an invisible enemy that seemed to ignore their most advanced defenses. "We can't ignore this," President Chen argued. "Today it's their worlds. Tomorrow, it could be Earth. Or this could be a trap," the Russian delegate countered, "drawing us into a conflict we can't win." The debate raged for days as more messages arrived from the collective. Their situation grew more desperate with each transmission. More worlds fell to the invisible enemy, their quantum-based defenses useless against something that seemed to exist between dimensions. Sarah worked through the nights, analyzing the collective's technical data. "Their entire civilization is built on manipulating quantum fields," she reported to the council. "But look at these energy readings from the attacks. Whatever's destroying them seems to feed on their quantum-based technology. Which means our more primitive technology might actually be an advantage," General Hayes realized. "We still use physical weapons, mechanical systems, chemical propulsion. We're not as dependent on quantum fields." President Chen stood before the council on the fourth day of deliberations. "We've all seen the evidence. We've all heard the arguments. Now we must decide. Do we hide behind our relative safety and watch an advanced civilization die? Or do we prove that humanity's worth in the galaxy isn't measured by our technology level, but by our willingness to help others?" The voting began. One by one, nation after nation made their choice. When the final tally was displayed, the decision was clear. Earth would answer the call. "Implement Operation Shadow Guard," President Chen ordered. "General Hayes, you have full authority to deploy the stealth fleet." In orbit, Earth's newest ships began final preparations. Unlike the collective's quantum-powered vessels, these ships relied on advanced materials and careful design to avoid detection. They couldn't match the speed or power of collective ships, but they could move unseen through space. Sarah found herself assigned as Chief Science Officer on the flagship, EDS Nighthawk. As she watched Earth recede behind them, she thought about humanity's long journey to the stars. They had dreamed of first contact for centuries, imagining themselves as the primitive species learning from advanced aliens. Instead, they found themselves cast in an unexpected role. Humanity, the supposed primitives, might hold the key to saving a civilization far more advanced than their own. Their outdated technology and different way of thinking could be exactly what the galaxy needed. "All ships, prepare for quantum jump," General Hayes announced from the bridge. "The collective gave us the coordinates of their nearest outpost. Let's show the galaxy what humanity can do." The fleet vanished in a flash of light, carrying Earth's hopes and determination into the unknown. They had no idea if their plans would work, if their different approach would make any difference. But they knew they had to try. Because sometimes the most primitive solution is exactly what's needed. Sometimes the old ways still work when the new fails. And sometimes, those you came to help end up teaching you as much as you teach them. The quantum jump ended, and Sarah got her first look at an alien world. The collective's outpost hung in space before them, a massive structure of crystalline beauty that dwarfed Earth's largest space stations. But behind it, nearly invisible to normal sensors, lurked something that seemed to bend space itself. The hunt was about to begin. Humanity was about to show the galaxy that true advancement isn't just about technology. It's about keeping all your options open, about remembering the old while embracing the new. And perhaps most importantly, it's about being willing to help others, even when you think you have nothing to offer. First contact happened in complete silence. The collective's outpost filled the Nighthawk's view screen, its crystalline structures refracting starlight in patterns that seemed impossible. But no one aboard Earth's flagship spoke. Every system was running in stealth mode, engines powered down to minimal levels, communications restricted to tight-beam laser signals between ships, because something was hunting in the darkness beyond the station. Dr. Sarah Chen watched her quantum sensors as they tracked distortions in spacetime around the outpost. The readings matched the collective's data perfectly, areas where reality itself seemed to twist and fold, leaving destruction in their wake. But unlike the collective's advanced ships, the Nighthawk and her sister ships remained undetected. Contact from the outpost. Communications Officer Rodriguez whispered, though sound couldn't travel in space. "Old habits died hard. They're asking for identification. They can't detect our ships, but their long-range sensors picked up our quantum jump entry." General Hayes nodded. "Send the authentication codes they provided. Let's introduce ourselves." The response was immediate. A dozen quantum-powered ships emerged from the outpost, their energy signatures blazing across space like miniature suns to the Earth fleet's sensors. Sarah winced at their visibility. The collective's technology was incredibly advanced, but they'd never needed to hide. "This is Administrator Venn of Outpost Sigma," a voice announced over the comm. The universal translator rendered it in slightly accented English. "We received Earth's acceptance of our call for aid. But where are you?" "This is General Laura Hayes of the Earth Defense Ship Nighthawk," Hayes responded. "We're maintaining stealth protocols due to the hostile presence we've detected near your station. Request permission to dock with minimal power signature." There was a long pause. "We're not detecting any ships in range except our own patrol vessels. Your quantum jump was recorded, but look to coordinates 227 Mark 35, Hayes instructed. "We're going to fire a brief maneuvering thrust. Watch carefully." Sarah held her breath as the Nighthawk's chemical thrusters fired, a momentary burst that would be nearly invisible against the backdrop of space. But it was enough. By the first light, Administrator Venn breathed. "You're right there. How are you hiding so completely? Our sensors are the most advanced in known space. That's precisely why we can hide from them." Sarah explained, taking over the communications. "Your sensors are designed to detect quantum signatures, gravimetric distortions, and energy emissions. Our ships use almost none of those. We rely on materials technology, chemical propulsion, and passive systems. Primitive technology, one of the collective officers muttered, clearly not realizing their comm was still open. Primitive, yes, Hayes agreed, causing the officer to sputter an apology. But effective, especially against an enemy that hunts by detecting advanced energy signatures. Permission to dock was granted immediately. The Earth fleet glided into the massive hangar bay using minimal power, their dark hulls standing in stark contrast to the gleaming quantum ships of the collective. Sarah felt a moment of self-consciousness as she led the first delegation off the Nighthawk. The collective's environment suits were seamless marvels of technology, while the Earth team wore what must have looked like crude mechanical pressure suits to their hosts. Administrator Van met them personally, his elongated form towering over the human delegation. His silvery skin rippled with bioluminescent patterns that the translator identified as expressions of extreme curiosity. "Fascinating," he said, studying their suits. "No quantum field generators for pressure maintenance. No gravity compensators. How do you manage prolonged exposure to space? Mechanical pressure seals, recycled air supply, and good old-fashioned human endurance," Sarah explained. "We've found that sometimes the simplest solutions are the most reliable." The meeting that followed revealed the full scope of the crisis. The energy beings, as the collective called them, had appeared 6 months ago. They seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially in some other dimension, making them almost impossible to detect or engage with conventional weapons. Worse, they were attracted to the quantum fields that powered virtually every piece of collective technology, from their ships to their environmental systems. They consumed the fields, Venn explained, displaying holographic footage of an attack. When they feed on a sufficient scale, they cause a cascading quantum collapse. Entire worlds have gone dark, their technology rendered useless. We're losing colonies faster than we can evacuate them. Sarah studied the footage carefully. These attacks follow patterns. Look, they always approach from areas of natural quantum fluctuation, like the edge of gravity wells or magnetic field interfaces. "We've noticed the pattern," Venn admitted. "But by the time our sensors can detect them, it's too late. They move faster than our ships, and our weapons pass right through them. Then we don't try to outrun them or overpower them," Hayes said. "We hunt them the way humanity learned to hunt on Earth, by understanding their patterns, predicting their movements, and setting traps." The collective officers looked skeptical, but Sarah was already seeing possibilities. "Your quantum technology is incredibly advanced, but it's made you dependent on detecting and manipulating quantum fields. We still use other parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, gravimetric sensors, radar, even visual observation." She pointed to the footage. "These beings might be partially out of phase with normal space, but they still interact with it. They distort light, create gravitational microlensing effects, leave traces in magnetic fields. We can track them using methods your civilization abandoned centuries ago." "Primitive technology," the same officer from before said, but this time with a hint of hope in his voice. "Sometimes," Sarah replied with a smile. "Being primitive is exactly what you need to be. Humanity learned to hunt long before we had advanced technology. We learned to hide, to track, to trap. Now we'll teach you how to do the same among the stars." As if to emphasize her point, the station's quantum sensors suddenly screamed a warning. A massive energy distortion was approaching from the system's outer reaches. The hunt was about to begin, and humanity's primitive methods would face their first real test. But as Sarah rushed back to the Nighthawk with the rest of the Earth team, she felt a surge of confidence. The collective had called for help expecting advanced warriors. Instead, they got clever hunters with simple tools and ancient skills. Sometimes, that was exactly what you needed to be. The energy being emerged from the quantum wake like a predator rising from deep waters. To the collective's advanced sensors, it was barely a whisper, a faint distortion in the quantum fields. But to the human fleet's primitive detection systems, it blazed like a bonfire in the night. Multiple visual distortion patterns, Sarah reported from her station on the Nighthawk. Gravitational lensing consistent with previous attacks. It's big, probably 3 times the size of anything in the Collective's records. General Hayes studied the tactical display where the entity's movement patterns were mapped in red lines across space. Years of submarine warfare experience on Earth's oceans had taught humanity how to track invisible predators. Now those skills were being put to use among the stars. All Earth ships maintain stealth protocols, Hayes ordered. Collective vessels proceed with standard patrol patterns. Let's not show our hand too early. The trap was elegant in its simplicity. The collected ships continued their normal operations, their quantum drives radiating energy like beacons. But hidden in their shadow, Earth's fleet waited with systems that the energy being couldn't detect because they were too primitive to register on its senses. Target is accelerating, Rodriguez announced, moving exactly as predicted. It's following the quantum gradient toward the station's main power core. Sarah watched the tactical display intently. The energy being followed the same hunting pattern they'd observed in the recorded attacks. Approach along quantum field lines, consume isolated power sources first, then move in for the kill. But this time, its prey was ready. Look at these readings, she said to Administrator Venn, who had joined them on the Nighthawk's bridge. It's not fully in our space-time. It phases in and out, probably to avoid detection. But there's a pattern to the phases. Venn studied the data with growing amazement. How are you tracking it so precisely? Our quantum sensors barely register its presence. We're not using quantum sensors, Sarah explained. Radar, infrared, gravitational distortion, visual light bending. We're combining a dozen different primitive detection methods. Your civilization abandoned these technologies centuries ago, but they still work. The energy beam drew closer to the station. In the void of space, crystalline structures began to vibrate as quantum fields fluctuated. The Collective's patrol ships maintained their precise formation, looking vulnerable and unaware. All ships, execute pattern Delta, Hayes commanded, just like we practiced. The Collective ships suddenly scattered in seemingly random directions, their quantum drives flaring. The energy being, drawn to the largest power source, followed the brightest signal, right into the trap. Launch mechanical drones, Hayes ordered. Hundreds of small, unpowered devices shot out from the Earth ships, spreading in a precise pattern. Each drone carried a simple payload, dense matter with an artificially induced quantum field. Together, they formed a 3-dimensional net in space. The energy being sensed the quantum fields from the drones and surged forward to feed. But as it tried to phase between dimensions to approach safely, it found itself tangled in overlapping fields that forced it to remain partially materialized. Now, Hayes commanded. Earth's ships fired their primary weapons, not energy beams or quantum disruptors, but simple kinetic projectiles accelerated to incredible speeds. The energy being, trapped in a semi-materialized state by the drone net, couldn't phase away completely. For the first time, the Collective watched their enemy take physical damage. The entity writhed in space, its form distorting as it tried to escape. But everywhere it turned, it found more drones, more overlapping fields, more precisely targeted kinetic strikes. Humanity's ancient hunting techniques, refined over millennia on Earth, proved devastatingly effective in space. By the first light, Venn whispered, "You're hurting it. You're actually hurting it." The energy being made one last attempt to phase away. Sarah tracked its desperation movements on her sensors, comparing them to known patterns. It's going to try to quantum jump. All ships, clear the area. The entity gathered itself for a massive energy burst, attempting to tear open a path to safety. But the drone net had been designed for exactly this scenario. As the being tried to jump, the overlapping quantum fields created interference patterns that trapped it between phases. For a brief moment, the energy being became fully visible to normal space, a writhing mass of light and distorted spacetime. The Earth fleet's kinetic weapons struck simultaneously from multiple angles, their simple physical projectiles ripping through the temporarily materialized target. The entity's death was spectacular. It collapsed in on itself, releasing a burst of energy that the collective sensors registered as a quantum cascade failure. When the light faded, nothing remained except scattered debris from the expended drones. Silence filled the Nighthawk's bridge. Then Ven began to laugh, a musical sound that the translator couldn't quite capture. "Primitive technology," he exclaimed. "We spent months trying to develop new quantum weapons, new detection systems, and you defeated it with simple physical objects and basic physics." "Sometimes the old ways are the best ways," Hayes replied with a small smile. "Our ancestors learned to hunt by understanding their prey, by using the environment against them. The principles haven't changed, just the scale we're working at." Sarah was already analyzing the sensor data from the encounter. "We can replicate this tactic," she announced. "The drone nets can be manufactured using your technology, and the kinetic weapons are simple to produce. We can teach your people how to track them, how to predict their movements." "More than that," Ven said thoughtfully. "You've taught us something about true advancement. We became so focused on quantum technology that we forgot other approaches existed. Perhaps being primitive isn't about lacking technology. It's about keeping your options open." As the Earth fleet regrouped and began planning their next hunt, Sarah thought about the irony of their situation. Humanity had dreamed of meeting advanced aliens, hoping to learn their secrets. Instead, they found themselves teaching one of the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy the value of simple solutions and ancient wisdom. The hunt had only begun, but already the galaxy was learning an important lesson. True strength comes not from having the most advanced technology, but from understanding how to use every tool at your disposal, no matter how primitive it might seem. News of the energy being's defeat spread through collective space at quantum speeds. For the first time since the attacks began, hope replaced fear. In the weeks that followed, Earth's fleet worked closely with collective engineers to mass-produce their primitive but effective weapons. Sarah found herself teaching alien scientists how to use basic electromagnetic sensors, while veteran submarine commanders trained collective ships in the art of silent running. The hardest part, Sarah explained to a group of collective technicians, is learning to rely on your eyes and instincts again. Your quantum technology is incredible, but it's made you blind to simpler signals. The collective proved to be quick learners. Their advanced manufacturing capabilities turned to producing Earth-designed equipment, created in days what would have taken humanity months to build. Soon, a new kind of fleet emerged. Collective ships modified with human-style stealth systems and armed with kinetic weapons. General Hayes stood on the Nighthawk's bridge, reviewing reports from across collective space. The energy beings had grown cautious after losing one of their own, but they hadn't stopped their attacks. They'd just become more selective in their targets. "They're learning," Hayes observed, "adapting their hunting patterns. But so are we." The combined fleet's first major offensive targeted a system where 3 energy beings had trapped a collective colony. The aliens had been feeding slowly on the planet's quantum infrastructure, forcing the colonists to shut down more systems each day to survive. "Remember your training," Hayes broadcast to the fleet. "They think they're the hunters. Show them what it means to be hunted." The battle began not with dramatic energy weapons or quantum attacks, but with silence. The fleet approached using minimal power, guided by passive sensors and visual observation. Sarah's refined detection methods allowed them to track the energy beings without revealing their presence. "Multiple targets detected," she reported. "Classic predator behavior. They've separated to cover more ground. They don't expect resistance." The trap was laid with precision born of practice. Drone nets deployed in carefully calculated patterns, creating a web of quantum fields too subtle for the energy beings to detect as artificial. Collective ships, now trained in Earth naval tactics, maintained strict emissions control as they maneuvered into position. The first energy being never saw the attack coming. It drifted into the drone net while pursuing what it thought was a damaged collective ship. The kinetic strike, when it came, was devastating. The second entity, reacting to its companion's death, tried to phase shift, only to find itself caught in a second prepared trap zone. But the third being proved why its species was so feared. It adapted quickly, recognizing the pattern of drone nets. As it fled, it began emanating random quantum pulses that would have blinded conventional sensors. Switching to visual tracking, Sarah announced calmly, "All ships, pattern match Protocol 3. This was where humanity's experience truly showed its worth. For centuries, Earth's submarines had played cat and mouse games in the ocean depths, learning to track enemies who tried to hide in background noise. The same principles worked in space. The fleet tracked the energy being not by its quantum signatures, but by the subtle distortions it created in the starlight behind it. Target plotted, Hayes announced. All ships, execute containment pattern Delta. The collective ships moved with practiced precision, no longer broadcasting their presence with active quantum drives. They herded the energy being toward a prepared kill zone, using minimal power signatures to appear as natural quantum fluctuations. When the trap finally closed, it was almost anticlimactic. The entity, focused on avoiding the obvious drone nets, didn't notice the gravitational anomaly until too late. Earth's kinetic weapons struck from multiple angles, their simple physical projectiles tearing through partially phased matter. As the last energy being died, cheers erupted across the fleet. Human and collective voices joined in celebration. But Hayes was already planning the next phase. "We've proven the tactic works on a larger scale," she told the assembled commanders afterward. "But we need to move faster. They're adapting to our methods, learning to recognize our traps." Sarah presented her latest analysis. "They're communicating somehow, sharing information about our tactics. But they still have to follow certain rules. They can't fully phase out of normal space. They're drawn to quantum energy sources, and they have to follow efficient paths between feeding grounds." "Then we use that against them," Venn suggested, showing how well he'd learned human tactical thinking. "We create quantum signatures too tempting to resist, but place them along paths that force them to choose between exposure and starvation." The strategy evolved rapidly. Collective worlds began shutting down their quantum technology in controlled sequences, creating artificial energy gradients that channeled the energy beings into prepared hunting grounds. Earth's stealth ships, now joined by collective vessels using the same techniques, waited in the darkness. More battles followed, each one refining their tactics. The energy beings learned to avoid obvious traps, but that only made them more predictable in their caution. They began to hesitate before attacking populated worlds, giving the defenders time to prepare. "We're not just winning battles," Sarah realized as she studied the pattern of engagements. "We're changing their behavior. They're starting to fear us." Fear is a primitive emotion. Venn noted with what Sarah had learned was the collective equivalent of a smile. "Perhaps that's why your primitive methods work so well against them. You understand the basic forces that drive all living things." The combined fleet pressed its advantage, moving from system to system, driving the energy beings away from populated worlds. But Hayes and Sarah both knew they hadn't seen the enemy's full strength yet. Somewhere out there, the main body of energy beings was gathering, preparing for a response to this unexpected resistance. The true test was still to come. But now, at least they faced it with unity and understanding. The collective had learned to value Earth's primitive wisdom. While humanity had gained access to advanced technology, they were only beginning to understand. Together, they were becoming something new, a force that combined the best of both civilizations, and they would need every advantage for the battle that loomed ahead. The warning came from a distant sensor buoy, one of thousands that Sarah had helped the collective deploy using Earth's primitive detection methods. A massive quantum disturbance was moving through deep space, larger than anything they'd encountered before. "It's not just an attack force," Sarah announced, studying the readings from her station on the Nighthawk. "Based on the energy patterns, it looks like their entire species is on the move. They're abandoning their previous hunting grounds. General Hayes absorbed this news with characteristic calm. They're adapting again. Instead of sending small hunting groups, they're moving as one overwhelming force. They mean to break our defenses through sheer numbers. The energy being's target was clear. The collective's home system, Lumerus. 6 inhabited worlds circled a massive blue star, each one hosting billions of lives and representing the pinnacle of quantum technology. If those worlds fell, the collective civilization would effectively end. They're hoping to overwhelm us. Venn observed from his position beside Hayes. Our previous tactics won't work against such numbers. We don't have enough drones to create containment fields at this scale. Then we don't try to contain them, Hayes replied. We let them come to us, but we choose the battlefield. The plan that emerged was audacious in its simplicity. The collective began a seemingly panicked evacuation of their outer colonies, leaving quantum reactors running at full power. To the energy beings, it would appear that their prey was retreating in disarray, creating a trail of feast points, leading to the richest target of all, Lumerus itself, Earth's fleet, now joined by hundreds of collective ships equipped with stealth systems, scattered throughout the target system. They positioned themselves in the shadow of moons, inside dust clouds, and along gravitational interference paths, everywhere sensors wouldn't think to look. Like ancient hunters, Sarah explained to the combined fleet's commanders, we're not trying to overpower our prey. We're using their own instincts against them. They'll follow the path of least resistance, the most efficient route to the greatest food source. The waiting was the hardest part. Days passed as the massive swarm of energy beings approached, following exactly the path they'd prepared. Sarah used the time to refine their sensors further, combining collective quantum technology with Earth's broad-spectrum detection methods. Look at this, she told Hayes and Venn, displaying a new analysis. They're not just a swarm, they're a coordinated entity. All these quantum fluctuations we've been detecting, they're communication signals. The entire species thinks and acts as one. Which means, Hayes realized, if we can disrupt their coordination. The final pieces of the plan fell into place. As the swarm entered the outer reaches of the Lumerus system, they found exactly what they expected. Rich quantum energy sources leading to an even richer target. The collective's home worlds blazed with power, their quantum reactors running at maximum capacity. But hidden throughout the system, the combined fleet waited with weapons that had been modified based on Sarah's discovery. Their kinetic projectiles now carried quantum pulse generators, not powerful enough to attract the energy beings, but perfectly calibrated to interfere with their communication frequencies. The battle began at the system's edge. The swarm, moving as one vast entity, surged toward the first line of quantum beacons. Earth and collective ships held their positions, watching through passive sensors as their prey committed to the attack. All ships, execute Operation Discord, Hayes commanded. The fleet struck from every direction at once. Kinetic weapons tore through the swarm's outer layers while the modified warheads detonated in precise patterns, creating quantum interference that disrupted the being's collective consciousness. For the first time, the energy beings experienced confusion. Their perfect coordination began to break down as the quantum communication network that bound them together became filled with noise. Individual entities started acting independently, their movements becoming erratic and uncoordinated. It's working, Sarah reported, watching the sensor readings. Their swarm structure is dissolving. They're breaking into smaller groups. That was when the second phase began. The quantum reactors on Lumerus's worlds began shutting down in a precise sequence, creating energy gradients that split the swarm further. What had been one overwhelming force became dozens of smaller groups, each one confused and seeking the nearest energy source. The combined fleet struck again and again, using all the tactics they'd developed. Drone nets trapped isolated groups. Kinetic strikes eliminated the confused entities before they could regroup. The energy beings, accustomed to acting as a single consciousness, found themselves unable to coordinate their responses. "They're beginning to retreat," Ven announced, "breaking off by clusters, trying to escape the system." But Hayes had planned for this too. "All ships, execute containment pattern Omega." The fleet had positioned itself not just for the attack, but to cut off escape routes. Every path out of the system led to more traps, more waiting hunters. The energy beings found themselves fighting not just for food, but for survival. The battle lasted for hours, but its outcome was never in doubt. One by one, the fragmented groups were isolated and eliminated. A few managed to quantum jump to safety, but their numbers were too small to pose a significant threat. As the last energy signatures faded, a different kind of silence fell over the Lumerous system. Not the tense silence of hunting, but the quiet of victory. The combined fleet emerged from hiding, their hulls illuminated by the light of the worlds they'd saved. In the aftermath, as damage reports were compiled and victories counted, Sarah found herself on the observation deck of the Nighthawk, watching collective ships moving through space alongside Earth vessels. "You know what amazes me most?" Ven asked, joining her at the window. "Not the victory itself, but how it was achieved. You didn't just teach us new tactics, you taught us to think differently. To remember that progress doesn't mean abandoning what came before." Sarah nodded. "And you taught us that advancement doesn't have to make you vulnerable. It's not about choosing between primitive and advanced technology. It's about understanding when to use each." The lessons learned would reshape both civilizations. The collective began incorporating Earth's primitive but reliable systems into their technology, creating hybrid designs that were both powerful and resilient. Earth gained access to quantum science that would have taken centuries to develop independently, but tempered it with their practical experience. More importantly, both species learned that true strength comes not from technology alone, but from wisdom in how to use it. The energy beings had been defeated not by overwhelming force or superior technology, but by understanding, adaptation, and the willingness to embrace both old and new ways of thinking. As Earth's fleet prepared for their long journey home, they left behind not just allies, but friends who had learned to see the galaxy in a new way. The Deathworlders had come not to conquer or dominate, but to teach and learn. In doing so, they proved that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their ability to survive harsh conditions or adapt to challenges, but their understanding that true advancement means keeping all options open, from the most primitive to the most advanced. In the end, that was perhaps the most important lesson of all.